Are you going to cheat yourself out of a great retirement by only using the 4% rule when really you can probably get something like 7? In today's video, we find out if the math makes sense. So in today's video, I want to take a look at two of the leading retirement planners in this particular space about safe withdrawal rates. That's William Benjamin and Wade Fowle, and figure out how on my left, Mr. William has a withdrawal rate of 4% and potentially up to 13%, while Wade Fowle teeters on the safe side and says, well, maybe you should look at 2.4%. So let's take first a look at Benjamin's style and how he came about his 4% rule and kind of what his goal was. That way you can see how he got his number and also why he believes his number is very pessimistic. Let's take a look. What he did was he compiled 75 years of data from the 1920s to 1995 and said, let's take a look at the worst time periods, and even within those worst time periods, retiring into them, let's find out how we can have a portfolio based on stocks and bonds and a rate at which, adjusted for inflation every year, we can safely withdraw every year. Let's see how long the portfolio can last. And I want it to last at least 30 years because that's kind of what the retirement age look like. Maybe you retire when you're 60 and you need that portfolio for 30 years. How do we find that magic percentage withdrawal rate? And be sure to hit the like button and subscribe so that the math budget can be paid and we can have more videos like this. All right, so let's break down the assumptions that William Benjamin used. Now, the three catastrophic periods that he kind of pulls from, he nicknamed the Little Dipper, the Big Dipper, and the Big Bang. You could tell he kind of liked astronomy. So during these periods, they were below average return rates or really high inflation. And what that did was gave him an ability or an idea to say, hey, past performances are not reflective of future performance, but it does mirror. So if something happened in the past, his assumption was that it could happen in the future, and we need to figure out how to best have a portfolio that is stress test for that. Now, how do we build the portfolio? It's comprised of stocks and bonds. And in his modulation, he found that 50% stocks up to 75% stocks, the remainder being in bonds, was probably the best composition for this model. It pretty much ran the safest. Now, as far as a rate, he initially tested at as low as 3 and went all the way up to about 10. And he found that 3%, retiring in any of those years, looking forward 30 years, a 3% withdrawal rate would allow you to actually have a portfolio that lasted the whole 30 years, no matter what market type you managed to retire in, and experiencing all those market downturns. 4% came really close. There's about a few instances where it only lasts about 31 years. So that's kind of what he adapted. The 5% one came short, and as you know, as we kept going up, we lost a few more portfolios before that 30-year period ran out. So that's what Mr. William did. He coined his term the safe max rate. So if you hear me use that term in the future, the safe max rate, that's kind of William Benjamin's rate. He fluctuates it from 4.1 to 4.5 to 5. So just kind of know that that's his methodology when I talk about the safe max rate. Now, let's move to Wade Fowle, who is a leading retirement researcher. He's got a wonderful book about how you can plan to retire, and he uses more modern tools and modern technologies to address this same thing. Now, the difference between what he does and what William does can be found as we look into his data. So, how did he stress test the portfolios? Well, he stress tests these portfolios by having an equity swing, so from 0, no equity, up to 100, using simulations running forward based on historical data for 30 years. You can see the chart. It's hard to make sense of it until you see it. Over a 30-year period, the bottom row, the x-axis, shows us how much of our portfolio is invested in stocks. The y-axis tells us the success rate that the portfolio will last during those 30 years. So as you can see with those three different lines, the first line is the rolling historical simulations. The next is the Monte Carlo simulations based on historical averages. And the last line is the Monte Carlo simulations starting for low initial yields. And the reason he did this is he wanted to find out under which circumstances would the portfolio succeed and fail, right? The last one shows us retiring into a down market. The first one shows us how it is if we looked at historical data. And the middle one kind of figured out if we use the random data points from the last 30 years, how mapping forward 30 years would look. And as you can see on the graph, the rolling historical simulations have a 100% success rate at 40 to 70% stock portfolio compositions. What's even more alarming though is this next chart I'm about to show you, and it tells us the probability of failing. So here, same assumptions, 30 years, same data with the x-axis being the stock and the y-axis being the success rate. We can see that most of these portfolios have some level of failure, meaning that if we are to stress test these portfolios based on the assumptions, that even at 3%, at a 60-40 portfolio, there's still 9% chance that our portfolio will fail. So what can we now do? Well, we have to go below 3%. And in my video you have seen, if you haven't watched it yet, it's 2.4% that Wade Fowle came up with. All right, so we got the safe max at 4.5 to 5. Then we got Wade Fowle's number at 2.4, which is roughly half of that upper limit for William Benjamin. So what number then do I use, or do you use when you're thinking about your retirement? Well, I'd like to first go over these assumptions. So these assumptions are pretty much telling you that you're retiring in the worst case time. Worst case scenario happens during the 30 years of your retirement. So worst case scenario, if all goes to mutt, then 2.4% to 5% is your withdrawal rate that you can kind of go by if you plan on having a 30-year life portfolio. Now, what happens if good things happen, right? What happens if average things happen, or just below average and not catastrophic? Well, of course, your return rate or your withdrawal rate can go up. And that's what William Benjamin recently said in his latest article about how most likely it's closer to 5 as a safe rate, but some retirees can and do take out 13% and are able to sustain their portfolio for 30 years. And it's because they're retiring into good periods. So a lot of times, and as also a financial planner, we as financial planners have to kind of give our clients the worst case scenario so that where we have an expectation set a little bit lower so that we can obviously optimize the portfolio and not fall short of our clients' expectations. Just cutting into his epilogue where Benjamin pretty much says the same thing, client expectations. Now the stock market is volatile. If you have seen anything this year, 2020, I don't know how we're going to end, but if you can just by looking at the numbers, it's really unpredictable. All the economists say it's just going to go up. If you have questions or want to know about the market and how COVID is affecting, you can go check the video here. But for the scope of this video, just kind of realize that that 4% rule, 5% rule, whatever rule you want is more of a reflection of how your portfolio is structured and your plan. So William Benjamin, his plan says 30% in S&P, 20% in S&P 400, which is a small mid-cap kind of a index, and 50% in intermediate treasury bonds. That'll give you about a 5% withdrawal rate on your portfolio for 30 years. Wade Fowle, on the other hand, he suggests using a mix of products, things like annuities, to provide you with a base level of income, and of course other insurance products to get you with stable rates that you can bank on when the market goes down. So we have other places to pull our money from. You got to remember, William Benjamin model said that you're taking out 4% or 5% of the total account value, whatever allocation it is at that time. So if stocks are down, you're essentially taking out more money from your initial stock position than your bonds. What Wade Fowle suggests is have a plan for each income need, or sorry, for each expense, so that you never really have to dip into stocks when it is inopportune. That's kind of the route that I take. We want to have like a safety net for when the market's down, so that we can have something we can pull from that we know is a stable asset, so that if the stock market goes bad, if COVID-25 comes or whatever comes, we have somewhere else to pull our money from. So now, with that said, what can you do? How can you plan better for your retirement? Well, what I do and what I try to educate is that there are different facets of retirement. Longevity risk is what we're talking about here. 30 years, right? We want to make sure our portfolio lasts at least 30 years. The longevity risk of the retirement planning process is the first part of any process. It's pretty much replacing that income that you had when you're working with another asset or another cash flow source. The next thing you need to plan for is liquidity, which basically says if you have a one-time immediate massive cash need like long-term care or something were to happen catastrophically to your health and you need money now, how do we address that? The next is a lifestyle. That's the fun part. Maybe we can get 13% if the stock market does well. Take that vacation, 30 days in the Bahamas or wherever you want to go. And the last one is legacy. That's what we want to leave behind to either a charity or our loved ones. So those are the 4 L's of retirement planning. Each one of those has their own intricacies, but if you want to learn more, be sure to subscribe to this channel, like the video, leave a comment below on what you thought was surprising with these methodologies, and I'll see you in the next video.